All right, welcome, my friend, to the On the Blue Line podcast for law enforcement. I am your host, Wayne Mulder, and welcome. If you're watching this on YouTube or Rumble, welcome. I know you're like, this guy's lost his mind. He's got his hat on backwards. He's got a pair of glasses. We'll get into all of that later. But on this week's episode, 3 questions we're going to answer. How often should law enforcement train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Do younger generations rely too heavily on their tools rather than defensive tactics? You can probably guess the answer to that one. And what is the most important skill for all of law enforcement? The On the Blue Line podcast starts now. All right, well, welcome back. I'm not going to waste a lot of time. That's my promise. In bringing you up to speed, it has been 1/4 of the year, 3 months that you have not heard from me, and I apologize to you. But the short version, the succinct version, the to-the-point version of what has occurred is too much. That's the short answer. In a short time, I had some opportunities in my day job that led to a promotion. I had some opportunities in the education space that led to starting towards my graduate degree. And then, of course, there is all the peripheral stuff that comes with life. So those 3 things all coming together in a confluence at the beginning of 2023 led to me having to make some choices, and that was, though this is the most important thing, the On the Blue Line podcast and what I'm hoping this will become, I had to pause for a moment. But that does not mean that content paused in any way, shape, or form, so I'm here to tell you and happy to tell you that new content was being recorded the entire time. And the first thing I want to do is get some of these older episodes out to you, and that is what you're listening to today. So the first few of these episodes you're going to hear over the coming weeks are all episodes that were recorded, some of them even the end of last year, so I apologize that they're not timely. However, as you know, the content in so many of these podcasts is stuff that can benefit us in our everyday lives, and I think you're going to get something out of this no matter when you last listened or when these were recorded. And of course, I'll be talking more in Morning Roll Call about my life and what's been going on and give you a little bit more depth. So without taking any more time, let's get to this week's guest. It's Jarrod Anderson. He goes by Coach Jarrod. Let me try that one more time, this time in English. Coach Jarrod, BJJ, on Instagram. Since we recorded this episode, he has started his own company, which is Apex Combat Solutions, LLC. Apex Combat Solutions. I want you to be sure to go down to the show notes. Be sure to click on what he's got going on and check it out. But he is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and has over 20 years of experience in the martial arts, including Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, boxing, Muay Thai, wrestling, self-defense tactics, and so forth. And that really is a lot to do with what we talk about in this episode. We get into some of the training courses and what his goal was. And at the time that we recorded this episode, it was really a lot about what he was hoping to do next. And the good news is he did it. So without taking any more time, let's hear what Jarrod has to say. Here's this week's guest, Jarrod Anderson. All right. Well, Jarrod, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be a great conversation. I think we got a lot of things in common. And of course, you were recommended from a great guy, Mr. Ferguson, or Fergie as he likes to go by. So I'm looking
Fergie's
forward
awesome.
to this.
He's the man.
He absolutely is. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Let's start, Jarrod, where I always do. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Okay. Now, is it black coffee, or are you a sugar in your coffee kind of guy?
Black coffee.
All right. Where is your favorite place to have that cup of coffee? Where's that place that brings you rest, relaxation?
Oh man, what are those things?
I know.
Honestly, my coffee is either getting slammed in my kitchen in the morning or on the way to work. So I don't have a peaceful place where I drink it.
Okay. Well, it is interesting, and it is funny. I do interview a lot of guys who are retired from law enforcement.
Sure.
And they're the ones that are typically, like standing on the back deck, enjoying nature. That's the goal eventually, I think, for all of us.
Absolutely.
So do you have a best or worst travel story?
Oh, best or worst travel story. So this one is actually an interesting one. So back in, I think it was 2012 or 2013, I was competing at the World Championships out in California. But it was on the middle of the flight, we got redirected and landed in Arizona. Nobody knew why. And we found out that's when the LA airport shooting was.
Oh, no.
And now I was flying into LA as that happened. And so, luckily that situation got, handled pretty quickly. But the aftermath of obviously with especially like an active shooter situation, it's not just over and okay, go back to normal. Obviously, There's different things that go on and everything. Well, so they let us land, but vehicles weren't able to. They had a 5-mile perimeter around the airport itself, so you could leave, but in order to leave, you were walking. And so we had flown in, and I was competing early the next morning. And so obviously our flight was diverted. And then we had to get back in the air, land in LA, and then only to walk 5 miles with my luggage and everything and get picked up after, outside of the perimeter. So that's probably my worst travel story, is just having to compete early the next morning and, getting that 5-mile walk in and having to deal with all the stuff. Am I going to make it there? Am I going to have to drive from Arizona to there to make it in time? So it was hectic.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Just the mileage you put on your feet walking through an airport. And then to have to walk outside that perimeter.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got a family member who's a pilot, and to save some money one time, he suggested I park in employee parking, but I didn't have any kind of bus pass or anything. So at the Atlanta airport, I was in the far end of the employee parking and walked from there to my terminal. Yeah, you got a little exercise in that day for sure.
Yeah, I bet.
I feel your pain.
Yeah. But like both my parents worked for the airlines when I was growing up, and so we always would fly standby. So I've got a lot of horrible standby stories where you don't make the flight. And so definitely, I'd much rather drive when I travel now.
I'm with you. Depending on how far it is,
yeah, for sure.
I fly to Denver next week, but depending on how far that trip is, I'm with you. I would much rather drive.
Yeah.
So do you have a most meaningful modern nonfiction book?
You know what? I actually just got done reading all the Jack Carr series. So
great series.
The Essential List and all of the books that went beyond that. And I actually became a huge fan of his, throughout his books. And I'd say those are right as of right now, those are my favorite ones.
Oh yeah. No, I would in the fiction genre, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. And then
I worked with a corporal that turned me on to that series.
Okay.
And great. Did you watch the TV show?
Yeah.
How did you feel? Did you feel like it mimicked the book?
Obviously there was a lot of differences and stuff, but it was close. But I definitely think, the book, you got more out of the book.
Yeah, you always do. Like there seems to be so much more depth to them.
Absolutely. But if he comes out with another series, I'll definitely be watching that too. I think that was I like those kind of shows anyway. So
yeah, I agree with you. Well, and I was a little bit heartened, and not to give anything away for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, but you definitely got to watch The Terminal List. But at the end there, where they showed the scene with him on the sailing vessel, it feels like they're opening it up for the second
for something
book.
Else, yeah.
So I'm hopeful as well that there'll be another movie in that series.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but what is that place that brings you the most peace? Like your favorite spot to kind of stop, breathe, and enjoy life?
As hectic as it sounds, I would say training, doing jiu-jitsu, doing any of the combatives training that I've been, involved with now. And it just is as chaotic as it sounds, it's very peaceful for me.
You are not the first person to say that. It is really amazing. The guys that regularly practice BJJ, they all pretty much say the same thing. I had Adam Hattery on the podcast. In fact, his is going to release. The listeners, it will have already released by the time you're listening to this one.
Okay.
And Adam said exactly the same thing. His favorite places there on the mats, or most peaceful places right there on the mats.
Yeah, I have to agree.
So let's start a little bit with your story. We talked offline that you're from the North and currently in the South, but start wherever kind of you want to with your origin story. It sounds like your dad did some pretty interesting things as well.
Yeah, he definitely led an interesting life. And then, after I was born, he kind of settle down, to because he raised me by himself,
Okay.
And so after I was born, he definitely took a back seat to like the action the action life.
Kids will do that to you.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. But but he was a martial artist, and like we had touched on before, like he was a PI. He was like a manager of different nightclubs and controlled all their bouncers and security. So in pretty rough areas throughout Daytona Beach and St. Louis, Missouri, and in Minneapolis as well. So he definitely had the stories. But he was a lifelong martial artist as well, which is where my martial arts bug came from early on. I was never involved. I always just trained with him, and he never pushed me or forced me to do it. So I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. And then the next week, okay, let's do a little bit. But my formal martial arts training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu started in 2008, 2009, when I had moved to Florida specifically for that.
Okay.
Like I had mentioned before, through high school, and shortly, 1 or 2 years after graduation was definitely not my best moments. Got into a lot of trouble in high school. Nothing too crazy. I never went to jail or anything like that. But my group of friends and I, we were pretty well known for getting in a lot of fights and a lot of brawls and which.
Now, were you living in the South at that time, or were
I was in Minnesota. I was still in Minnesota at that time, and then it just got to the point where I started to see the patterns, like doing the same thing over and over and over again. Nothing is changing. We're not improving ourselves or our lives. And that's like when I just kind of made the decision, you know what, I'm leaving. I like martial arts. I like fighting. I like jiu-jitsu. I'm going to go do something with that. And so I left home, moved down to Florida, started training, and, here I am today.
Now, did you have some family or so forth down here, or was it just a complete random?
I've got
darts at a dartboard, or
no? I've got an aunt that lives up in Port St. Lucie area, and I'm down in Palm Beach. So I had a family down here a little bit, but I moved down here with my dad for a year, and so that's when I started training. And then after we couldn't really find any stable jobs, so we ended up moving back. And then within a year of being back in Minnesota, my instructor that I was training with down here, who I stayed in contact with, I came back and visited a couple times, called me and said, "Hey, I'm opening up a new gym. I would love to have you come and be an instructor. You can live with me, all expenses paid." And I was in my early 20s still at that time.
Yeah.
And so I said, done, deal. Because when I went back to Minnesota, I started to kind of fall right back into the normal thing with all my friends and stuff. And I didn't want that for myself. At that time, my goal was to be able to, if I can teach jiu-jitsu, train jiu-jitsu, compete, that's all I wanted. And so when that phone call came, I jumped on it, and I think I was on a plane the next week.
That's awesome.
So, that was in 2012.
Very cool. Do you think, and I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how important was it to get to a new geographical location when you talk about like the influences and stuff, and kind of like that catalyst for changing your life?
It was crucial. I think it was crucial because, again, like I truly believe, that we're products of our environment. And so like if you hang out with four assholes, you're probably going to become the fifth one.
Yes.
And if you hang out with four world champions, the same thing, you'll probably become the fifth one. And so I think surrounding yourself with, and it's not that like I still love my friends to death, and and I talk to them to this day, and they've all grown up and everything now as well. But I think I needed that full life change to really kind of recenter and refocus myself into what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And I kind of want to touch on that a little bit when we talk, because I know for me, when I was young and in those high school years, it was so important for me. I spent several summers of my high school experience at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, because I had an uncle who was in the military. And yeah, awesome. that was huge for me. Just getting to that different geographical location, opening my eyes to a different way of thinking.
Absolutely.
Really, you can track so much of the positive things in my life back to those very moments.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that's super important. So from there, tell us a little bit, because you've competed at a pretty high level in BJJ.
Yes, sir.
So walk us through a little bit of that journey.
like I said, 2012 is when my full-time jiu-jitsu career started to take off, and I was still, relatively new. Like I was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, pretty much running a gym under a black belt, teaching a lot of the classes, training all day, like eat, sleep, train, repeat for, multiple years on end.
Yeah.
And so that started competing a lot, started winning a lot, progressed, eventually got my brown belt. Once I got my brown belt, I started to slow down a little bit because I owned a gym. I was running my own gym. And so you kind of
down there in Palm Beach.
Down here in Florida. Yep.
Okay.
In Palm Beach Gardens. And then I got my black belt, and then I started competing a little bit more. So my best competition years were actually after I received my black belt.
Oh, wow.
So I won the Pan American Championship, and then I got third in the World Championships as a black belt.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yep.
We've seen, through this big push, we've seen it in the law enforcement world, and then obviously like with MMA and so forth, this push towards a lot of the basics of BJJ and learning those techniques. What are your thoughts on that from two standpoints? First of all, for someone like me, right? If you listen to podcasts at all, you listen to these guys, this is all they talk about, right? So whether you're listening to a Joe Rogan or, these different guys that are out there, Andy Stumpf, this is what they talk about is rolling on the mats and so forth, Jocko. So to a guy like me that may be listening and interested in BJJ, but doesn't want to compete, right? Like that, it can't be my life. What would you say to that person? And what would be those first steps?
Go train. It's the competing, was a big part of it for me and is a big part of it for other people, but it's not the entirety of it. It's a lot of these guys, especially I'm seeing a lot, retired law enforcement, people that get out of the military. They need something that kind of stirs up those competitive juices a little bit. Yeah. Jiu-jitsu is for that. Or also, like we talked about, having peace on the mat is another part of it. People that are suffering from PTSD and stuff, they need somewhere to focus, that energy into a positive. And jiu-jitsu has been that for a lot of it as well. So the best thing to do is to, do your research, find a gym. If your interest isn't to become a competitor, you're probably not going to want to go to a gym that's 100% competition focused, because you're not going to, you're either going to become a punching bag for all the competitors, or you're not going to be training, functional jujitsu, in terms of self-defense or street applicable skills. So I like to have a nice blend, because obviously I was a competitor and I still train competitors part-time. But my main focus now is more self-defense focused, realistic combatives for law enforcement, for security, for military, and for myself.
Yeah, no. And I mean, we obviously live in a world where security is becoming, we're seeing things we've never seen before in this country, Absolutely. At least within my lifetime. Sure. And especially in some of these inner city areas and so forth, things you're seeing across this country. So you're definitely seeing a focus of people wanting to learn these skills. Are you seeing it outside the law enforcement military communities as well? Are you seeing
absolutely? Because absolutely, I'm a good friend of mine, Ruben Alvarez, which I'm going to actually give you his contact information. He'd be someone good to have on your show as well. He's a Broward County SWAT cop, and he actually has his own training organization, which I'm involved with, as a participant, as a student, and so I go to all these courses, and, when I first started, I was like, it's probably going to be, a lot of police officers and stuff, which it was the opposite. There was more civilians than police officers, wanting people, law-abiding citizens who want to learn how to, be more proficient, with their carry weapon, and how to apply combatives while you're carrying when someone's trying to go for your gun. And obviously there's a lot of, police officers in those courses as well, which you would think police would want to be training more and more and more, but unfortunately that's not really the theme that we're seeing a lot of. I think I'm seeing more and more police officers, take the initiative to get their own training, not just rely on whatever the department's going to do for them, which is usually not much.
Right.
So they have to take that initiative to go out there and do it themselves. But I'm seeing civilians, doing the same tactical training and doing the same combatives training that, many law enforcement officers are doing too.
That's awesome, as it should be. Yeah. The training within, and this has become a theme here lately on, it seems like, interview after interview, but it's very true. The training out there with law enforcement is wholly inadequate at the agency level, but it is for several reasons, right? So budgets play a big role in it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, if that's the only training you're getting, then depending on the agency you work for and the state that you're in, you're probably only using your firearm once a year, if that, maybe twice if you do some sort of active, because some states regulate active shooter training. So you may do some sort of active shooter training in the summer and then some sort of qualification course in the winter.
Absolutely.
And that's it. And then when it comes to, I was just talking, actually Adam Hattery was the one that I was talking to about this. We were talking about how the training is so inadequate when it comes to self-defense training, because in some cases, you're starting to see this incorporation of jiu-jitsu into the curriculum, especially when we come to de-escalation training and so forth.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you're taught certain moves, and then you don't see those moves again for 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, honestly, we went through our cycle 2 months ago, and I, quite frankly, I would absolutely screw them up. Left arm, right arm. There's no way that I would perfectly execute those.
Absolutely. So I got invited to actually teach a segment of I guess it was the floor. It was in our area, in our Palm Beach area, where I taught a segment in the actual instructor's DT course. So I was training all of the instructors.
Okay.
And you saw it there, a lot of these guys, they only see that stuff every time they have to go requalify to get their instructor patch. And so even these guys who are supposed to be the ones teaching in these agencies don't really know a lot either. Yeah. They do enough to get that instructor patch, and that's it. They don't train outside. And so when I got invited to that, I think there needs to be more of an emphasis. Again, well, I know a lot of it is budget. The agencies can't afford to put out all these, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year towards training. And you are seeing some agencies, put more of an emphasis on it, but it should be a universal emphasis on it where, everybody needs to train.
Right. Absolutely. So we talk a lot about the negative sides of it, or the inadequacies of it. So flipping that coin on the side, what would be, the whole ruler for the day kind of thinking, what would be adequate training to keep that skill set up in like a law enforcement type environment, someone who's not competing?
Yeah, for sure. I think it still needs to be, consistent to at least 2 to 3 times a week, I would say, because at the end of the day, you're only going to be as good as what you put into it. So if you're not putting much into it, you're going to train once a month or whatever, which I think is still a huge improvement. Doing some type of a law enforcement combatives course once a month would be great, which is what I'm actually working on developing now with my own training company, is something where once a month we have a course that we offer into, just basic combatives for, and I'm not talking about like jiu-jitsu that you're going to see in competitions and stuff. I want street applicable training that is specific to law enforcement, whether it's taking someone down effectively, controlling them effectively. Part of my friend Ruben's course is, while you're grappling, introducing a weapon into that fight when needed and when not to, because, if you do pull your weapon out too soon, you're giving them a chance to take it from you. If you have the combative skills, you don't need to present your weapon, And so I think the more and more of these courses that are coming out, I think people are starting to get more interested in it, and because I think training if you have an officer that's training jiu-jitsu consistently on their own, I think that they will eventually develop the confidence to where they can use it and apply it at work. But there also needs to be that bridge where it's like, okay, we're not wearing a gi. We're not, you're training without any of your service patrol gear on. and you have to blend it together now from, your basic jujitsu training to now weapons-based entanglements, weapons-based training. And that's what, Ruben's company is big on. And that's what I eventually plan on producing as well.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's super important. I mean, that's one of the things they kind of train you on day one of the academy.
Sure.
Is that there's a weapon in every incident that you go to.
Yes. Yes.
So depending on when we talk about retention or, all these controlling the scene and so forth, a lot of it comes down to the fact that you've already introduced a weapon into that scene by your mere presence.
Yeah, absolutely.
What other, besides obviously the need for more of it, which we could beat that dead horse, but what other needs were you seeing? Because at some point here, you kind of shift towards your friend Ruben's company and working in this training world. What other deficiencies were you noting when we talk like law enforcement and civilian training?
Well, I would say, honestly, I think the shooting in general, there's a lot of cops that aren't proficient in shooting, that, like you said before, that maybe they train once a year for their qualifications, or if they're a part of a special unit, maybe they do more training throughout the year. But I've seen a lot of police officers through these training courses that, for one, aren't comfortable holding a pistol, and for two, aren't good at it.
Yeah.
And when I see, and I'm a civilian, yes, but I put a lot of effort and training hours into becoming, proficient with not just, obviously jujitsu and combative skills, but also, pistol and rifle training. At the end of the day, my mission is to be the best protector I can be for my family and be able to protect myself and protect others. God forbid anything ever happens around me. But police, for law enforcement, that's their job. They should want to be the best shooter, the best fighter, know every case law by heart, and just be able to just be effective at every base of being an officer. And we're not seeing that on a high level as of now.
Correct. Fortunately, we're seeing more and more companies come out, and I do like what I'm seeing where they're blending the case law, because it's one thing to know how to do something. It's a whole nother thinking to understand the why you may do something.
Absolutely.
And that is so important. And one of the things that you kind of see on a national scale, a lot of problems get created when people don't know why they can or cannot do something. So
absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. So in the training, so you're currently working with a training company now.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I train with them.
Okay.
So, I do the courses. Like I said, right now I'm a student. I am developing my own training company that's going to focus more on the combatives and introducing practical jujitsu to law enforcement officers and everyday citizens too. But as of right now, I'm enjoying being a student and doing these courses and helping out and teaching wherever I can. Like I said, I get invited to teach, like I said, at the police academy, doing the instructor's course and stuff like that. Perfect. And for me, I love it because unfortunately, I wasn't able to become a police officer, but I feel like because of my experience, I can still serve one way or another by helping police officers become better protectors also.
No, I think that's a great mission. When you, and I know it's still in its infancy as you're kind of discussing and looking into what you want to do, but what is your vision? Is it going to be where you're essentially working with agencies and training at agencies, or is it going to be location-based where they've got to come to your facility? Or
no, it can be, this right now, this is something I'm looking at on a small scale, just whether I'm doing courses for agencies or whether, I'm able to reach a good amount of officers as an individual who want to come take this course with me. I know agencies aren't really bringing in companies and stuff. They kind of want to try to keep everything in house is what I'm seeing a lot of. But that's where that's where I think it comes down to, the individual officers themselves, taking that extra step to learn, to train, whatever.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and I think it's so needed. And like I said, what what I am enjoying seeing is that there is an increase of places that are doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But there's so many agencies in this country and so many law enforcement officers
Sure.
that we need as many as we can to
Absolutely
fulfill the need that's there.
Yeah.
So let's quickly, so you've managed several gyms, owned a gym,
Yep.
correct?
I owned 2 gyms. So the first one that I owned was, again, here in Palm Beach. And then I partnered with a friend of mine, and we merged into a bigger gym. And so that's what I'm a part of now.
Okay.
So, and that's right now, I did that since 2017 until this year, where that was my full-time gig. And then, I'm engaged now. We have a son. And so now I wanted to make sure that I can have a more, what's the word I'm looking for? A more stable career position. And so a friend of mine that I train, he works for Florida Power and Light. And so he had a position on his team opened up. And so I was able to get in there. And so far I love where I'm at now as well. So I do the jiu-jitsu training thing on the side. I'll be running courses on the side. And then I still have my full-time career with FPL, which is it's a great company.
Oh, I'm sure. Of course, you guys were probably quite busy here recently.
Oh, yeah, I got my first 6 months on the job, and I got deployed twice for hurricane relief.
I'm sure. Well, I really appreciate what you guys, anyone from the state of Florida knows what these electrical companies do and the way that they just pour in and help. Yeah. And it's kind of neat because they come from across the country.
Oh, yeah.
Like you'll pass guys out of Georgia and Tennessee. Yeah, and it's pretty impressive the effort that people do to get the things we take for granted back on.
For sure. Absolutely.
Let me just quickly segue into a curiosity question. You talked about owning these gyms. What are some of the lessons from a business standpoint? We've talked a lot about training, but I'm kind of curious on the business standpoint. What are some of the lessons you learned from owning your own gyms?
Well, I definitely think the lessons learned is, which is hard because I'm a people pleaser. I like to make everyone happy around me. And I've learned the lesson where you're not going to make everyone happy. And, and it's good to try, but try understanding that it's inobtainable. But, so try not to make everyone happy, but also trying to, create a good atmosphere for people. Because at the end of the day, people, I'm here to serve them. They're paying me for the services. And so it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm doing the best job that I can to make sure they're fulfilling their goals or what their needs are and stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of gyms that try to have a sense of control over their students where it's like they tell them what to do. They can't do this, even to the point where, you can't train at other gyms. And I'm not a fan of that. I think, ultimately they're my customers. It's my job to, provide my customers with adequate training and a good and safe environment for them and their families.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's, running a gym is hard. It's not easy. I did it by myself in a big facility with where I was teaching 6-7 classes a day, plus managing the front desk, plus trying to do the marketing and sales and everything else. And it's definitely hard.
Yeah. No, it is. And people don't.
And then COVID hit.
So how did you guys pivot through that?
So we were fortunate enough to have a good, strong base of students and stuff that kind of stuck with us through the whole, quarantine and closures. And we did some Zoom training and stuff like that just to keep people active. And, but it was tough. We were closed for 3.5 months.
Wow.
And, it was definitely a tough hill to climb up, but we got through it, and it ended up on the back end of it. It ended up kind of projecting a bigger business for us because I think people started to realize that, health and fitness and, doing all these healthy things is important for staying healthy.
Right. No, that's super important. Yeah, I feel so bad for people in other states. We're very fortunate here in Florida.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other states such as, the obvious ones, California, New York, so forth. I mean, some of those guys were shut down for 18 months or longer.
Yeah.
I don't know how you keep any business going when you're being shut down that long.
It's tough. I know people that have, gyms in California where they had to close. They had to shut down permanently. I have friends that had, restaurants in New York that had just opened up from before all of it, and they had to permanently close during it.
Wow. Yeah, it's sad because that really is what America is these small business owners. So
Absolutely.
it's tragic seeing what happened.
Yeah.
So just kind of segueing into the future of what you're doing with the training and so forth. What is your long-term vision then? What is your goal, your dream? Like, what is next for you, Jarrod?
So for me in the training realm is like, I want to help as many people as possible. I want to make sure that police officers are confident in their abilities and they're not nervous or scared. Because I think a big part of, unfortunately, the bad shootings and stuff that sometimes happen, I think can be a consequence of lack of confidence. Someone gets scared and they pull their weapon and shoot when it might not have been a situation where that was called for. And so I think if we can prepare officers to be more confident in their combative skills and more confident in just their overall attitude towards, criminals in general, then I think it can help kind of like take the spotlight away, so to speak, from, the bad things that are happening. So the more officers that I can help and empower with martial arts training, I think ultimately can put a better light on them in the community and also take away some of their stresses, because I'm sure it's hard. Unfortunately for me, like I said, I didn't get to experience much of that from an officer standpoint. But I know it's hard for those guys who are out there not sure, especially in these cities where people are hunting police officers and attacking and ambushing police officers. You're showing up to work knowing damn well you might not go home.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so absolutely.
Anything that we can do to give them a sense of comfort and relief, at least to a certain extent, to where they're capable and they're confident and they don't lose their shit, then I think helps out a lot. So for that, I want to help law enforcement become better officers, and also for everyday law-abiding citizens. I think there's I'm a big advocate for training, and I think there's a big majority of people that are conceal and carry holders that have either never shot their gun, never trained with their gun, never trained how to present it, and let alone, at the end of the day, you got to get to it first, and then you got to be confident in using it. Yes. And then you have to understand the laws behind it. A good book that I just finished reading also, it's called Violence of Mind, and the guy in there talks about it. Like, he was in a self-defense situation where he was attacked by 3 people and he stabbed the person. And then he went to prison for 5 years, even after the people that attacked him said, yeah, we attacked him. We were drunk. We went out of our way to find him and blah, blah, blah. And he ended up still going to prison, even though it was a self-defense situation. Now, I don't think, probably stabbing someone's not the best route either, but at the end of the day, that's what he felt like he needed to do. So he talks a lot about, he's an instructor now as well, firearms instructor and combatives instructor. And he talks about, like, you have to weigh the risk reward of things. Like, someone's going to cut you off in line and you're going to say something to offend them. Now they're ready to fight you. Now maybe they're ready to kill you. The mission is to get home safe. And if you're putting yourself in situations where that mission is in jeopardy, then it's not a good thing.
No, that's great. I'm going to look that book up as well. 2 thoughts that came to mind, though, from what you just said. The first is, and this is just me speaking anecdotally, and I don't know if this is something you've noticed from outside law enforcement, maybe giving a different perspective, but there seems to be almost a generational thing. So I'm a little bit older than you. I'm in my early 40s. Sure. And there seems to be a generational thing that I'm noticing with newer, younger officers that come on that have an over-reliance on tools and less of a willingness to go hands-on. Is that something you're seeing generationally?
I've seen that a lot, and I actually was just speaking with a friend of mine last night who's a retired cop from New York, and this was the topic that came up last night, and it was just like, you're getting these younger officers who are getting hired because they have a nice polished background. They maybe know someone in the agency. It could be a family member, or they went to college. But the issue is when you're hiring people that don't that maybe have too clean of a background, someone that's never been punched in the face, someone that's never been in a fight, someone that's never has no street knowledge or experience, you're going to create officers that don't know what to do when these bad situations come up. There's going to be an over reliance on tools. There's going to be a lack of wanting to actually engage hand to hand, like you said. And I think that's what you're seeing a lot of. A couple law enforcement buddies that we talk to is like, and I don't mean this as a jab to any agencies, but I truly feel that a lot of they're hiring sheep to go after wolves, and that's just not how the world works.
That's interesting. I've not taken it that direction, at least not in these conversations, and
Sure.
that is very interesting to me. That it really, because there is. And there's nothing wrong with this, but there's a big push right now to get guys with bachelor's degrees, master's degrees. Like,
I mean, that's why I was passed over a lot of times.
Yeah,
because I didn't have that college. I didn't have enough college credits.
I had the same difficulty because I had ran a business prior to coming into law enforcement in my early 30s, and I ran into the same thing where I was competing with guys that had their master's degrees.
Yeah.
And running my own business, I just didn't see the need at that point to pay all this money to go through college. It wasn't that.
I think, they need to look, and it most likely won't ever happen, but they need to look at, you ran a business. That's life skills. That's dealing with people. That's dealing with the public. For me, I ran a business teaching combatives and fighting. That's got to be looked at like as some type of life skills that directly applies to law enforcement. But I was told like, oh, you didn't have any stable career. You didn't have a stable career prior to this. So that went against you. It's like, I taught martial arts my whole life. Like that was my career.
Right.
But it wasn't, they told him, well, if you had worked for FPL for the last year, then you probably would have got it. But because a gym isn't stable, blah, 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 we don't see that as, adequate life history or adequate job history.
Right. Yeah. And I'm someone who doesn't believe in an all or nothing approach, right? So two things can be true at once. So there's nothing wrong with having the college degrees. And absolutely, if they have a degree in criminal justice, that's wonderful. In fact, my intention is to get my master's. But that, like you said, shouldn't disqualify those life skills or those soft skills. Yeah. I honestly, and I've said this before, one of my first jobs, Kmart, doesn't even exist anymore, I know. But for us older people, there was a Kmart back in the day. I
remember Kmart.
And that was one of my first jobs. But I often talk about how the skills I learned there in dealing with people, 100% transfer over to law enforcement. Because you really are in a service-based industry. You're dealing with the public every day. Yeah. And if you can learn those soft skills, when you're 16 years old, now, in my 40s, I rely on that basis that I learned back then.
Absolutely. And that's what I tried to explain about, being a martial arts instructor. I've dealt with every possible type of human being there is to deal with that come through those doors. I've had, obviously I've trained kids, women, teenagers, violent felons that just got out of prison and are trying to better themselves by doing something, and to law enforcement officers. That's why, like, on the mats, we're all one, right? But if you break it up, it's such a big variety of people that are training, and learning and figuring out how to deal with each individual person differently, because you can't treat everyone the same. Right. You have to, I can't talk to you the same way I'm going to talk to a guy that just got out of prison for stabbing someone. You have to speak to people differently based on, the type of person that they are.
Yeah. Well, it's received differently. People,
absolutely.
We even say that sometimes, in like a county type situation, because certain parts of the county, the way you deal with someone in certain neighborhoods, that are maybe above the middle class, the way that they interact with you is different than the interactions. And that doesn't make one right or one wrong. And I'm not saying you are always offering customer service and you're being professional. That's not what I'm saying. But there is certainly a different way those conversations take place, and the way each one of you are talking to the other one. And it's not necessarily wrong. It's just two different worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. Two different worlds. And if you can develop the skills to be able to communicate in all those different worlds, then I think that gives you a big edge.
I think that's great. Yep, that's exactly it, is developing those skills to be able to communicate effectively no matter which situation you're in.
Because again, I think communication is a big thing for law enforcement as well, where if you do have those skills to effectively communicate with a wide variety of people, you can probably avoid, any kind of escalation and stuff like that, or be able to talk to someone and get your point across to where they understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I would argue communication is as important as the self-defense skills.
I agree 100%, because if you can effectively communicate, you're never going to get into a situation where you're going to need those skills.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And when we are seeing what we're seeing now with the need for de-escalation, and even within the mental health, because there's more of a realization now too, of dealing with people who are going through mental health crises and how do you do that? And yeah, those communication skills really are the basis for any good self-defense training.
Yeah. It's almost like maybe they should look at more maybe training after the academy and those de-escalation courses that officers take. I think there needs to be a little bit of an emphasis on, ultimately every officer is also a negotiator. And so they should be, that should be a big part of their training, and being able to communicate and talk someone down. And whether it's talk someone from jumping off a ledge or to talk someone down from shooting someone, ultimately you're going to have to use the same communication techniques, all around. So I think there should be communication courses and dealing with, talking people and de-escalating these situations.
Yeah. No, and there are in some ways, but again, it's like everything, there's the ideal and then there's the reality of where we're at. So we're working that way. One thing that you are seeing is, again, kind of back to that generational side, is like even the state of Florida saw that there were issues with younger generations because of things like social media and so forth, not having some of these basic communication skills and this ability to communicate, especially when someone has a differing opinion.
Absolutely.
So they've added to the law enforcement curriculum in Florida different communication exercises that are as simple as like something that's just a morning brief where they have to throw out a topic. Typically that topic is got to be something that is controversial. Sure. And you've got to just hold why you believe what you believe and let other people throw out a differing opinion. Sure. But something as simple as that kind of helps to mold exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Because especially in that line of work, you can't. I think the youth today, or the generations below you, below me, it's like there is no compromise.
Right.
There's either you're right, I'm wrong, and there's no discussion, and it gets into extremes where it's like, either people will start to fight each other because they disagree about something, and unfortunately, that's what's a big divide in our country, is because of those reasons. The lack of communication, not a lack of communication, but a lack of effective communication.
Correct. Well, and even going back to like the collegiate environment, it used to crack me up when you actually talk about communication, because there is actually a defined meaning of what communication is. And, you have the speaker, you have the receiver, you have the feedback. Like that's effective communication, like you just said. Yeah. And you don't get that. If people provide feedback, then somebody gets their feelings hurt, or, whatever the case may be, which
absolutely,
sadly, like you said, leads to the divide that we're seeing. I argue all the time, and maybe that's why I started a podcast, that one of the best ways to heal the divide is to have conversation. Because I'm not always right. You're not always right. Absolutely. But if you and I can discuss where we're coming from, things change. I'm not the same person I was at 20 years old.
No,
it's
same
because
with
of
me.
Conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I love it.
Do that. Yeah, to be able to do that, I think would solve a lot of problems.
I couldn't agree with you more. Well, we're getting down here on time. Let me ask you, I've got my final question for you that I ask everybody who comes on the podcast. And we've kind of touched on a few things that may qualify for this, but I like to kind of wrap it up into just one actionable piece of advice. So what is the one takeaway, the one thing that law enforcement officers can do that's going to make a difference in their personal lives?
In their personal lives?
Yeah.
I would say, and this is just from, speaking to friends who are officers, I would say When you get home, be at home. When you're at work, be at work. And I apply that to areas of my life as well. Like I said, I have a fiance and a son. And I know before, I oftentimes catch myself like I get home and now I'm thinking about work, or then I go to work and I'm thinking about what happened at home. And there needs to be that separation. So it's like, whatever you're doing right now in the moment, that's what you need to focus on. When you're at home, focus on home. When you're at work, focus on work. If you're playing baseball, focus on playing baseball,
Yes. That's
so
great advice.
Be in the moment and just like focus on the task at hand.
Yep. Jarrod, that is great advice, and something that hopefully people take to heart because it can make such a big difference. What is the best way for people to connect with you?
So everyone can reach me on Instagram. My handle is Coach Jarrod BJJ. And so I accept DMs. If anyone that listens, they want to shoot me a question or anything, I'm very open. I'm an open book. People can message me, reach out to me however they want. And, I definitely just want to give a big shout out to my good buddy, Ruben Alvarez with Paradox Training Solutions. Any law enforcement or law-abiding civilians that carry should definitely look into his classes, because it's a difference maker for people. And it's going to open a lot of people's eyes that maybe thought they were better than they were.
That sounds good. I will be sure to link both of those up so people can connect with you and connect with Ruben.
Awesome.
Jarrod, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a lot
of fun.
Anytime,
man. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. Have a good day.
All right. So how was that? I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jarrod. I really enjoyed sitting down with him and getting to know somebody new, and just hearing about the things that they're trying to do for the law enforcement community. I try to bring you a lot of different types of conversations. So if this one wasn't quite yours and you're like, man, I really wish you would talk to, let me know. Send us an email. You can always find out more about what I'm trying to do at On the Blue Line, ontheblueline.com. And then you can always follow us on social media at On the Blue Line Podcast on most social media, except for Twitter, which is at On the Blue Line and the number 1. So thank you again for listening. Thank you again for telling others about the podcast, for following, liking, subscribing, and all that good stuff. And thank you to those of you who financially have helped to push this show forward. That's a big part of getting us to the next level, and hopefully getting to the point where I'm working with other people who can help edit and so forth, which in turn will allow me to get this out more regularly, even with my current schedule. So thank you. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful week. I will see you next week. For a while here, it's just going to be the interview room as we get cranking back up here. So the next couple weeks, you'll just get the interview show, and then we will quickly be back to including morning roll call. And for the foreseeable future, I will do everything I can to always keep this content coming to you, because I get so much positive feedback that it's making a difference, and that's really what it is all about. So more on everything we're doing on the Blue Line, ontheblueline.com.